It was the evening of January 17th, 1871, in the small village of Maine, France. The winter night was heavy with fear, the air was cold, the fields were frozen, and the streets were covered in snow. For months the Franco-Prussian War had been tearing the country apart. Families had lost fathers, sons, and brothers. Cities were burning, villages were abandoned, and mothers prayed at their doors, holding rosaries with trembling hands. In that part of France, in a little farming village of Maine, only about 500 people lived. They were simple people, farmers, mothers, children, and old men. Their men had been taken to fight in the war, and everyone in the village knew that the Prussian army was marching closer and closer. Rumors spread like fire in the cold wind. The enemy was near. At any moment, their small and quiet village could be swallowed by war. In the middle of this fear, something happened, something that no one expected, something that would change the life of Maine forever. It did not come from the east, where the armies were moving. It did not come from Paris, where people were crying in despair. It came from above, in the sky, just over a small barn in the center of the village. The first to see it was a boy, only 11 years old. His name was Eugene Barbadette. Like many boys his age, he still dreamed of saints, of knights, of shining armor. That evening he was helping his father in the barn with his younger brother Joseph, who was only 8. But when Eugene stepped outside for a moment into the cold air, he suddenly froze. He could hardly breathe. His eyes looked upward, and what he saw made him silent. There, above the rooftop of the barn, was a vision, a woman, beautiful, radiant, and peaceful. She was clothed in a deep blue robe, and the robe was covered with golden stars that glowed like light itself. Her hands were raised, not in warning, not in anger, but in welcome, and her face was peace itself. She smiled gently, her presence calm and tender, filled with a light that seemed not of this world. Eugene stood still, unable to speak. Soon his little brother Joseph came out to see what was happening. He looked up and gasped. "I see her too," he whispered. Both boys stared into the sky, amazed, overwhelmed, unable to move. Their father came outside, confused by their silence. But when he looked up, he saw nothing. Other neighbors passed by. They saw nothing. Yet the boys stood there, eyes lifted, their hearts full of wonder. Word spread quickly. "The Barbadette boys are seeing something in the sky." People began to gather, lanterns glowing softly in the snow-covered street. Soon the small square in front of the barn filled with villagers, their breath visible in the cold night air. At first only Eugene and Joseph could see her, but then other children began to arrive. Francois Richard, 11 years old, Jean-Marie Labos, only 9. Each one looked up and saw exactly what the Barbadette boys had described: a woman clothed in blue and stars, smiling gently, hands raised in welcome. It was the children who saw her, not the adults, the parents, grandparents, and neighbors looked up at the same sky and saw only darkness. But they did not doubt. They looked at the faces of their children, faces shining with awe, eyes wide, voices whispering of the lady above the barn, and they believed. The crowd grew, and in the center of that winter night, the people of Maine began to pray. They prayed the rosary, they sang hymns, and as they prayed, something happened. The vision in the sky began to change. A black veil appeared beneath the woman's feet. Then above her head, a banner began to unfold slowly. Letters formed across the night sky, as if written in gentle light. The children read them aloud for the crowd to hear. "But pray, my children. God will hear you in a short time. My son lets himself be moved." The people wept. The old clutched their rosaries tighter. The young fathers, fearing for their families, knelt down in the snow. The children smiled as they prayed and sang, their eyes fixed on heaven. And through it all, the woman smiled with them. She did not speak, but her silence was full of meaning. It was a silence that comforted, a silence that healed, a silence that gave hope when hope seemed impossible. What no one in the village knew that night was that something was happening just beyond their knowledge. The Prussian general who was leading his troops toward Maine suddenly received strange and confusing orders. Without explanation, he stopped the advance. His troops turned around and retreated. No resistance had stood in their way. The path to Maine was clear. Yet, for reasons no one could understand, they never entered the village. The people of Maine, praying together in the snow, were spared. The next morning, the skies over Maine were quiet. The snow still covered the roofs, the fields, the barns, but something in the air was different. Something had changed. Word spread quickly that the army had turned back. Families came out of their homes in disbelief. They had been ready to run or hide. They had been sure that destruction was coming. Instead, they stood in peace, saved not by weapons, not by soldiers, but by prayer, by the faith of children, and by a lady in the sky. The children were questioned again and again. They were asked what they had seen, and every time their answers remained the same. They described her robe of blue, her golden stars, the red crucifix on her chest, the black veil under her feet, and above all, her gentle smile. They repeated the message that had appeared in light. But pray, my children, God will hear you in a short time. My son lets himself be moved. They never changed their story. They never added to it. They spoke simply and clearly with the innocence of children. In the days that followed, Pontmain was filled with wonder. People went to Mass with new devotion. They returned to the rosary. Even those who had not prayed for years now prayed again. The barn became a holy place, a place where people knelt in silence, where children lingered in the snow hoping to see her again. This was not a vision that brought fear. It was not a warning of punishment. It was a mother's reassurance. It was heaven's gentle hand touching earth. News spread quickly. Priests and bishops came to Pontmain to question the children. They found their words consistent, their hearts sincere. They saw that these children were not seeking attention. They returned to school and chores as always. Eugene would later become a priest. Joseph would live a quiet life of faith. But neither of them ever sought fame. They had seen her, and that was enough. Unlike other apparitions filled with drama or prophecy, Pontmain was marked by simplicity. There was no thunder, no spectacle, just silence, prayer, and a smile. And yet, the miracle could not be denied. The army had indeed stopped. The Prussian general himself later admitted, something invisible blocked our way. Soldiers spoke of feeling a strange force, something they could not see but could not pass. In 1872, only 1 year later, the church officially approved the apparition. Bishop Wichard of Laval declared it worthy of belief. The barn became a sanctuary. Pilgrims began to arrive, first a few, then dozens, then hundreds. They came not to be entertained, but to find peace. Eventually, a great basilica was built, its twin spires rising high above the small village, like hands lifted in prayer. Stained glass windows inside told the story of that night, the children in the snow, the Virgin in her robe of stars, the message written in light. Yet even with the grandeur of the basilica, Pontmain never lost its simplicity. The village remained small, quiet, and humble. Pilgrims who visited said they felt something in the air of stillness, a peace, a presence that could not be explained, but could be felt deeply. It was as if the echo of that night still lingered. The miracle of Pontmain was different from the great apparitions like Lourdes or Fatima. It did not bring secrets, warnings, or apocalyptic visions. It was gentle, intimate, hidden almost. But that was its beauty. It came not to kings or bishops, but to children in a village forgotten by the world. It did not demand, it invited. It did not frighten, it encouraged. And that is perhaps why its message is so powerful even today. The message was simple. Pray. Trust that God hears you. Believe that even when the night is darkest, heaven is near. That is what the people of Pontmain experienced, and it is what their story continues to tell us now. Even though the snow of that January night has long melted, even though the children who looked up into the sky have returned to the earth, the miracle lives on. It lives on in every whispered rosary, in every trembling prayer, in every person who dares to believe that heaven listens. Pontmain is not just a story locked in history. It is a reminder for us today. In our moments of fear, in our times of despair, when we feel small and forgotten, the message still speaks. Pray, my children. God will hear you in a short time. My son lets himself be moved. That night, heaven came quietly to a frozen village, not with fire, not with thunder, but with silence, with a smile, with hope, and it was enough.